like it's time for another segment. This segment of Jamie Explains, let's go ahead and talk about some prep issues. In other words, the preparation that is done for the building itself. A few of the questions that we have and concerns and problems that we've had over time is how the land around the building is sloped. In other words, are you tucking into a hill? Does the water flow towards the building or away from the building when it's all said and done? Bottom line is, we want all of the water to flow away from the building within at least 6 feet, if at all possible. Sometimes that is not possible, and there's other ways to mitigate that. However, the slope from a building or the driveway is something to take in mind when laying out your property. Water flow becomes a serious issue, mostly in the Northland, when we start talking about frost and frozen ground. A couple of things happen with frozen ground, and that is that the water freezing next to the surface will increase the movement of the ground due to the frost. When that happens, it increases the movement of the slab, which in turn causes more cracking. Very common in our neck of the woods, in the northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. It is just nature, and we should expect it. It is always nice to build all buildings high and dry, is what we like to say here at Economy Garages, and that typically means that within that 6 foot of the building you have positive flow, which means the water flows away from the building within that first 6 feet. That is always the best way to prep if it's possible. The other thing we run into is after we are done with our project, many homeowners landscape around the building, and final landscaping is up to the homeowner. However, what they don't realize is that code states that there must be a 6-inch clearance between the bottom of wood siding and grade, or the ground. So what happens after we leave is the homeowners will do the landscaping around it, or they'll hire it out. Problems that can happen there is that if the 6-inch clearance isn't abided by, which is actually against code, what can happen is a landscaper will come in, not realize the code, and then they'll build it up right to the bottom of the siding, which is going to be problematic for the building. Or they'll leave it a couple of inches down to put sod on it, which when the sod goes on it, it still brings it to the bottom of the siding. Also, any water close to the surface or splashing off the eaves when it rains is going to create a problem for wicking into that wood product and increasing the water content, which decreases the longevity of the product. And that is typically called wicking. When we take a T111 piece, for instance, a certain type of sheathing siding combination piece, it can wick up into the piece, and you can see that from the inside of the building when that happens. So one thing to combat that, even if you have that 6-inch clearance, the problem that can happen is during rain events, if it doesn't have gutters to move the water to a certain location, you'll get the splashing off the eave. When that happens, water splashes up next to the siding and underneath, and it increases that wicking. But to combat that is simply paint the product and maintain the product. When you paint any sheet product or wood siding, one very commonly missed area is to paint underneath the very first course or the bottom of the sheet. That area is the first thing that I look at when I go there, and I see any wicking so I can point it out to the homeowner. That is why the siding is sucking in this moisture, because that isn't broken or sealed by the paint. The other thing that happens in our northern climates, when the ground freezes, water does not penetrate the ground at all, or very, very minimal at best. And what can happen if you have a downhill slope and this building isn't put to the proper slopes and elevations, what can happen is, because that water cannot seep into the ground, and it might have impeding flow as far as flowing where it normally went, because people shovel the snow, melting snow turns to ice, and it can create problems. That buildup and lack of water going into the ground will create higher areas of moisture at a time of the year that you do not want it. So keeping your building maintained, cleared of snow, making sure that the slopes are kept open so water flows away from the building. Very, very key things to do in the Northland.